Elena is 54 years old, and the number on her screen is telling her she has failed. She has $350,000 saved for retirement, 30 years of disciplined, deliberate choices, and the calculator is telling her she needs 2.2 million. That is not a rounding error. That is not something she closes by working 2 extra years or cutting her grocery bill. That gap is structural, and tonight, it feels like a verdict on her entire adult life. But here is what the financial industry has spent decades making sure Elena never finds out. She did not fail the system. In 1978, the system was redesigned to fail her. A single provision buried in the Revenue Act of that year, a tax loophole drafted for corporate executives, was quietly repurposed over the following 2 decades to dismantle the entire architecture of American retirement security. Pensions disappeared. Risk was transferred from corporations onto individual workers. And the instrument used to accomplish that transfer was the 401k, a vehicle that was never engineered to carry the weight an entire generation was told to place on it. Elena did not make a mistake. She was handed a broken tool and told it was a ladder. And tonight, we are going to show you exactly how that ladder was built, why it was always going to fall short, and the 5 systemic reasons why Elena's story is not the exception. It is the rule. The first reason Elena cannot afford to retire has nothing to do with her savings rate, her investment choices, or her financial discipline. It has everything to do with a decision made in corporate boardrooms before she ever received her first paycheck. The 401k was not created to be the foundation of retirement security for the American workforce. It was a footnote, a narrow technical provision that allowed highly compensated employees to defer income into tax-advantaged accounts and reduce their immediate tax exposure. Ted Benna, the benefits consultant who first recognized the provision could be structured as an employer-matched savings vehicle, has said publicly that he may have opened a door he did not fully understand. What he saw was an elegant tax tool for corporate executives. What it became was something far more consequential for ordinary workers. Through the 1980s, corporations were staring at a growing problem. Defined benefit pension plans, the kind that guaranteed a specific monthly payment regardless of what the market did, were appearing on balance sheets as enormous, expanding liabilities. The 401k offered something no one had previously been able to offer, a CFO and exit ramp. Between 1983 and 2019, private sector pension coverage fell from 62% of workers to roughly 15%. The risk of a bad market year, the risk of longevity, the risk of outliving your savings, all of it was transferred, quietly and systematically, onto the shoulders of individual workers who were told they were being given greater control over their financial futures and long-term retirement security. What they were actually being given was the bill. Elena contributed faithfully to her 401k for 30 years. She did not panic sell during 2008. She took every employer match without exception. And she still arrived at 54 with a number that falls 1.85 million short of what the calculator says she needs to retire without financial fear, not because she did anything wrong, but because the instrument she was given was never designed to close that distance. It was designed to move risk off a corporate balance sheet and onto hers. That is reason 1. And it set the conditions for everything that follows. The architects of the modern retirement system built their projections around a specific assumption: that the average worker would live approximately 15 years past their last day of work. 15 years is a number you can engineer a financial product around. It makes a fixed savings target feel achievable. It was a reasonable assumption for the data available in 1978. It is no longer reasonable for the people retiring today. A woman Elena's age, reaching 67 in good health, is statistically likely to live into her mid to late 80s. A meaningful portion of women in her demographic cohort will live into their 90s. That is not an outlier scenario anymore. That is the median. And the savings system she was given, calibrated for 15 years of post-retirement spending, now needs to stretch across 25 or 30 years, and sometimes more. Researchers call this the duration gap, And it is the second reason the retirement math breaks for people who did everything right. The 401k contribution limits, the IRA maximums, the rule of thumb savings rates that financial advisors handed Elena throughout her career. All of them were calibrated for a shorter retirement than the one she is statistically likely to have. Nobody updated the targets when the lifespans extended. Nobody told Elena that the finish line had moved. The rules stayed fixed while the runway quietly doubled, and the gap between what her savings were designed to cover and what her life will actually require grew wider with every year that medical science added to the average American lifespan. Elena is not going to run out of time. She is going to run out of money while she still has time left. And that distinction, that specific cruelty of the duration gap, is the foundation on which Reason 3 is built. Living longer would be manageable if the cost of living in retirement scaled at anything close to the rate that savings were projected to grow. The crisis multiplier is healthcare, and the numbers are not subtle. General consumer inflation between 1999 and 2023 roughly doubled the price of goods and services across the economy. Healthcare inflation, over that same period, rose at approximately 3 times that rate. And for retirees, who consume healthcare at significantly higher rates than the working-age population, at precisely the point in their lives when their ability to generate additional income is most limited. That difference is not an abstraction. It is the mechanism by which a retirement that looks sufficient on paper becomes one that isn't. Fidelity's most recent annual estimate places expected healthcare spending for a couple retiring today at 65 at approximately $315,000 over the course of their retirement. That figure does not include long-term care, which is the line item most retirement calculators quietly omit, because including it produces numbers that feel too large to present without immediately losing the audience. Elena's savings account is not just a retirement fund. It is a medical invoice that has not yet arrived, issued by a system that was designed to extract assets most efficiently from people who spent their entire working lives accumulating them and have no remaining runway to replace what gets taken. The 401k transfers risk from corporations to individuals. The duration gap extends the period over which that risk accumulates. And the healthcare system positions itself at the end of that extended runway to collect. These 3 forces do not operate independently. They compound, and the compounding is the reason Elena's calculator produced 2.2 million instead of a number she could actually reach. Reason 4 is where the backstop fails. For decades, the house was the safety net. The strategy was straightforward. Buy a home, build equity over 30 years, sell it when the rooms feel too large, downsize into something smaller and cheaper, and use the difference to supplement whatever the retirement account could provide. It was the second engine of the middle-class retirement plan, the redundancy that made the whole system feel survivable, even when the primary vehicle underperformed. Elena's house, the one she bought carefully and below her means in 2003, is currently worth approximately $480,000. After her remaining mortgage balance, she stands to clear somewhere between $280,000 and $300,000 in equity if she sells today. Running those numbers, it looks like the plan is working exactly as designed. Then she looks at what a smaller house actually costs. The median price of a 2-bedroom, single-story home with reasonable proximity to healthcare infrastructure, because location relative to healthcare is not a preference for a 67-year-old, it is a logistical necessity, is currently $340,000 in her metropolitan area. After transaction costs, moving expenses, and immediate maintenance on a new property, the equity she releases from selling does not create meaningful capital for her retirement portfolio. It approximately covers the cost of the smaller house she is moving into. The downsizing myth did not die because homeowners made poor choices. It died because the housing market was structurally transformed by forces outside Elena's control. The chronic underbuilding of starter homes following the 2008 financial crisis, the entry of institutional investors purchasing single-family properties at scale, and a rate environment that locked existing homeowners in place and compressed available inventory to a fraction of what a functional market would produce. The asset Elena was told to treat as her retirement insurance policy has been absorbed into a market that extracts wealth from her on exit with the same efficiency that the healthcare system will extract it from her account balance. The two-engine retirement plan that worked for her parents has been reduced for her to a single engine that was never adequate to carry the full load. Which brings us to the fifth reason, and it is the one that makes all four of the others invisible until it is too late. $1 million sounds like retirement security. It is the number that has been embedded in the cultural imagination as the threshold. The finish line that once crossed means you have made it. Financial advisors built careers around it. Retirement calculators made it feel like a destination. And for a generation of workers who were told to anchor their planning around it, $1 million became the definition of enough. It is no longer enough. And the reason it is no longer enough is not captured by the official inflation rate, which measures a basket of goods that does not accurately reflect the actual spending pattern of a retired American in 2026. What researchers who specialize in retirement economics call shadow inflation, the divergence between headline inflation and the real cost increases in the categories that retirees actually spend money on, has been running significantly hotter than the Consumer Price Index for more than 2 decades. Housing costs for renters, healthcare premiums, and out-of-pocket expenses, home insurance in climate-affected regions, and the compounding effect of service sector inflation on everyday expenses have all risen at rates that the CPI underrepresents for the specific demographic of people over 65. $1 million, invested conservatively, and drawn down at the 4% rule that financial advisors have used as a standard for decades, generates $40,000 per year before taxes and before healthcare. In most American metropolitan areas, that is not retirement. That is financial fragility with a slightly larger account balance, and the distance between $40,000 a year and genuine security in 2026 is the distance that shadow inflation has quietly inserted between Elena and the finish line she was told she was approaching. $1 million is the new broke, and the people who are least prepared for that reality are the ones who spent 30 years doing exactly what they were told. Elena is still at her kitchen table. The number on her screen has not changed, but something else can, and it starts with understanding the difference between a personal failure and a structural one. Because that distinction is not just emotionally important, it is strategically necessary for anyone who wants to build something real going forward. Retirement, as a concept, is a 20th century invention. It was a product of a specific post-war economic moment. Rising real wages, employer-funded pensions, controlled healthcare costs, shorter average lifespans, and a corporate compact that has since been dissolved without ceremony or acknowledgement. The 5 reasons Elena cannot reach her number are not 5 separate problems. They are 5 symptoms of a single system that was redesigned to transfer risk downward while keeping the language of the original promise intact. The researchers doing the most honest work in this space are moving away from the language of the retirement number and toward what they call systemic resilience, a diversified approach to late-life security that combines income-generating assets, reduced fixed costs, phased transitions out of full-time work, community structures that distribute the cost of aging, and a clear-eyed accounting of what healthcare will actually cost rather than what optimistic projections suggest it might. None of that is as simple as hitting a number. But hitting a number was always a fiction, and understanding that it was a fiction is not a counsel of despair. It is the first accurate map of the territory Elena is actually navigating, and accurate maps, even ones that show difficult terrain, are more useful than beautiful ones that lead you off a cliff. Elena followed every rule she was given. The rules were written for a world that no longer exists, by a system that had already decided she would absorb the risk without being told the terms had changed. The first move towards something better is knowing that. Not softening it, not reframing it as an opportunity, not reaching for the silver lining before the weight of it has been properly felt. Just knowing it clearly, and refusing to accept the framing that the gap between where you are and where you were told you would be is a measure of anything except the distance between a promise that was made and one that was never intended to be kept. That is where Elena is tonight. And if the number on your screen looks anything like hers, that is exactly where you are too. And you are not there because you failed.